Hello, I'm Shashi Tharoor and welcome to the Youth Commission's National Parliament that has been assembled here in Thiruvananthapuram. I'm sorry that thanks to Kerala politics you are all facing a hartal today, and I'm equally sorry that because of confusion over the planned budget discussions on the weekend that I had to cancel my trip. I am instead addressing you through this virtual means. And I want to welcome you all to Thiruvananthapuram, and of course those of you who have come from other parts of the country will have seen some of the beauty of our state. The topic that I was asked to say a few words on, I obviously won't give you a full speech because of the fact that we're just doing this by video, but the topic that I was urged to speak to you about was the media, the current state of our media and the way in which it's functioning. And there I have to say that I'm a very torn individual because I grew up as a child of the media. My father worked for the media all his life. And I, as a small child, started reading every newspaper available in India. My father would get 6 newspapers in the morning, and then he would get 7 newspapers from other cities home in the evening. So I grew up reading newspapers and magazines. I started writing as a school student, and was published in every English language newspaper or magazine in the country practically during the time that I was in school and college in India. Then for many years after my graduate studies abroad, I worked at the United Nations, followed the Indian media regularly. In the old days before the internet, I used to get a daily Indian newspaper mailed to my home in Geneva and later in New York. I was often reading news that was 2 weeks late, but I would still value the opportunity to read an Indian newspaper every day. That is the extent of my commitment to the Indian media. And from that background, to come back to live and work in India where our media has changed so much, in small ways for the better, in many ways for the worse, has been for me very, very interesting as well as disturbing. It's changed for the better in some ways in that all media is expanding and flourishing. We are the only country in the world where there are more newspapers than before, more magazines than before, more internet sites than before, more television channels than before, more radio stations, FM stations than before. Everything is flourishing. At a time when, for example, in the United States, prestigious newspapers are closing down. Newspapers that have been around for 150 years, 200 years are closing down because the internet has helped destroy the economic model of newspapers. In India, we have no such fears. The media is flourishing and thriving. It's often more attractive. There's more use of color, good layout, imaginative writing, all of that. So in many ways, the media offers the Indian citizen much more variety, much more choice, much more to choose from. That's interesting. I remember the days when Indian newspapers' coverage of politics was just full of boring regurgitations of politicians' speeches. We've changed a lot from those days. And yet, the news is not all good. Because what we are seeing with our media is that while all of these positive things have happened, some very troubling negative things have also happened. For this, I blame principally our television news culture. The proliferation of television channels in every Indian language has meant that the premium is now placed on breaking news, on sensationalism, rather than on context, objectivity, or responsible reporting. Some of what the Americans would call journalism 101, that is the basic rules of journalism, how to separate fact from fiction, separate rumor from reportage, separate gossip and speculation from verified, confirmed information, separating opinion and commentary from straightforward reporting of facts. All of these basic rules that are followed in journalism in every civilized society are completely ignored in our media today. For the most part, any story that you hear or see is a jumble of all of this, of facts, of opinion, of quotes, of wrong quotes, of made-up quotes, of opinion, of speculation, of gossip, all of which are conflated together in a way that the reader has no way of judging what is true and what is not. That is overwhelmingly the case, sadly, and it's not just sadly in our television media where this happens, but also to some degree the print media has felt obliged to keep up with the trends in the television media, because they know that when people wake up in the morning the next day to read a newspaper, they've already seen all these stories on TV the previous day. And so they need to match that kind of low standard. The result, I believe, is that Indian democracy has been poorly served for the most part. Instead of the kind of deliberative discourse that Amartya Sen wrote about in his famous book, The Argumentative Indian, where he talked about a democracy emerging from a process of reasoned discussion. Instead of that, what do we have? We have talk show hosts shouting and screaming, invective, interrupting their guests, deciding on matters that they know nothing about, making themselves witness, prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner of various people whom they've chosen to be their targets. This kind of nonsense, to put it very bluntly, has become the principal characteristic, sadly, of the Indian media. And of course, people are tuning in to watch it as entertainment. Sometimes they enjoy putting their feet up and watching people hurling abuse and lies and charges at each other. The problem is, of course, that in the process, it is our democracy that suffers. It is the process in a society of reasoned discourse, argument, deliberation, conclusion, in order to enhance society's awareness of its own challenges. I'm not in favor of censoring the media. I'm not in favor of less journalism. I'm in favor of better journalism. I'm in favor of journalism that adheres to basic standards. I'm in favor of editors being trained to ask a journalist, which of this is fact, which of this is proven, have you got two sources for this allegation, do you have a recording to show that the quote you are using is actually an accurate quote? All of these simple things. I have, after all, lived in the West for a long time. I'm so impressed with the fact-checking that goes on before anything is reported in the Western media. There's practically no fact-checking here. In my 6 years as an Indian MP, I've never seen one example of fact-checking, particularly in stories that I happen to know something about. And so the result is this clamorous dumbing down of public discourse that comes from our media. And I believe that's sad and, in my view, rather a disservice to the Indian public and our democracy. So if there are young people here in the audience who are hoping to become journalists, I hope you will go in with a desire to maintain higher and better standards. I hope you will go in with a desire to illuminate society, to help influence society for the better by informing it better, not to go there in order to trash, to destroy, to break news, break heads, break reputations, and once you have broken one victim, move on to the next. That, I think, is a very sad use of the undoubted talents and skills that many of our journalists possess. I am sorry to therefore give you this somewhat mixed account of my view of what today's media trends in India are suggesting. I would love to see the media change for the better. I would love to see decent journalistic standards being upheld and practices and styles that are actually decent and acceptable, so that one day, I hope not too many years in the future, I can make a very different speech to a later generation of youth parliamentarians to assure them that the media now once again serves Indian society better. That's all I wanted to say to you. I wish you all a very successful and positive meeting of the Youth Parliament. And as we say in Kerala, Nandi Namaskaram, Jai Hind.